Leather and I have a love-hate relationship sometimes. It's one of those addicting things that I can't just not think about. What I love about it is the process. For me and the work that I do now, it's trying to figure out a problem and how to solve it. For instance, right now I'm trying to figure out how to make a custom jewelry box. There's so many different ways that you can design something like this. And that's part of what I love is the process, and then people's reactions. I mean, who doesn't love somebody coming up to your work and saying, wow, that's incredible. That type of stuff is kind of what you live for. The peacefulness of coming into my studio and sitting down, sketching out a project, hand sewing it. There's just nothing like it. It's almost like a therapy in a way. It's very therapeutic. You get kind of, engulfed in your thoughts. I highly recommend somebody who's struggling with stress in their life, or maybe they're having anxiety, maybe depression, whatever they're going through. Try picking up some leather and some leather tools and just sitting down and just getting lost in that, and I promise you, you'll probably become addicted. Hi, I'm Clint Wilkinson, and I'm a Tandy guy. Yeah, so I came from a pretty fast-paced world into leatherwork. I grew up in a saddle shop, actually. My grandfather was a saddle maker. He started his own business in 1957 called Weldon's Saddle Shop at the time, and he was making saddles, ropes, make all sorts of leather goods, really. And when he started his business, my mom, my grandmother, my uncle all helped him. We picked up some retail items, and that kind of slowly turned into, a larger and larger retail front. So eventually, in probably the 60s, 70s, something around there, the retail items kind of overtook the leather department. And eventually it grew into a really large Western store here in downtown Denton that was in business for 60 years. I learned the craft as a kid. My grandfather was a calf roper, my dad was a professional calf roper. They did never try to push that on me. Even though I did try, I didn't really like it. So they ended up getting me a motorcycle, a little dirt bike to ride around when I was like 11, 12 years old, and I just absolutely loved it. I just fell in love with, getting on my bike and riding around the pasture, and it was just it was like a freedom that I hadn't ever experienced before, and you could just kind of, in the same way a guy would get out on a ranch and ride a horse, you kind of get lost in your thoughts, and, it's just kind of a real freeing feeling, real peaceful. And I experienced that same feeling when I got on a dirt bike. So my dirt bike riding, from riding in a pasture, now has become full-on racing, mentality. And I was just fully engulfed in it, and I raced motorcycles from the time I was about 13 years old up until 21. During that time, I got interested in photography, and I'm going to the races or going to ride or whatever. Now I'm taking pictures of my friends. When I would email them the pictures, they just were freaking out, Well, then photography turned into film. Now I'm filming. So now I'm filming us riding around and things like that. So I ended up getting a job at a motocross magazine when I was about 20, 21 years old, I guess, because I still love that industry. And mind you, the cowboy and the roping and the leather and all that stuff I had left behind many years ago. All I wanted to do was just media. And so I did that from 21, 22 years old until I was about 32, really, 31, 32 years old. The friends that I met during my time at the magazine, we all had an idea to start this online publication because there had never been one in the action sports industry. So we were the first action sports online publication ever. We started it in early 2007. We had to figure out how, at least I had to figure out how, instead of doing a print design, learning how to code, which is completely different. And I'm all self-taught, Google was my best friend. And so I learned how to do all that stuff, and we quickly grew to the #1 motocross website in the world in about 3 years. And so with that lifestyle, it got to the point where that stress was starting to affect me, physically, mentally. It was affecting my family, and I had to make a decision in 2012 to continue down that path or to take a different path. And mind you, while I'm doing all this media work, I'm doing it inside my grandfather's Western store. So I was posted up inside my grandfather's Western store because I still felt like I needed to help the family business too. Because I could easily stop what I was doing on the computer and then go help a customer find a pair of jeans, find a pair of boots. If my granddad needed me to, cut a piece of leather, hold something so he could nail it into a saddle, I could do that easily. Something started to change in me as I got older, that you start to realize that family and those things mean a lot more to you as you get older. And I started thinking, man, I want to try to keep this legacy of Weldon's alive somehow, and I didn't quite know how to do it yet. But the more and more I thought about it, it was like, well, I'm pretty good with leather, and I had experience in creating a brand from nothing to #1 in the country, in the world, I guess. So I had the marketing experience, but I was real scared to leave a for sure thing into something that was completely unknown at the time. And so I did a little research. I found a couple of leather brands online that looked at their products and looked at their prices, and figured out, I can make that. And so that's kind of how I started into what I'm doing today. I pretty much left a really fast-paced, for sure thing into a really slow-paced, unknown thing. But with all that experience that I had, from marketing to photography to web design to you name it, I knew, and I had the confidence enough where I could start my own leather business. I still do everything to this day. I do all the photography work. I do obviously all the leather work, answer emails, you name it. So that was a fast-paced life I left. That was a really long answer. Like I said earlier, my grandfather was a saddle maker, but back in high school, I guess it would be the 40s, they used to teach leathercraft in high school. And they started with Tandy kits, Tandy tools, everything pretty much came from Tandy, from the high school. And so that pretty much got my grandfather started into making custom saddles, was the Tandy stuff. And when I was growing up in the shop, I would find these Tandy catalogs and Tandy, I guess the belt patterns, the plastic ones you can lay on the leather and rub it, and you get the pattern kind of imprinted into the leather. So that pretty much taught me how to tool, was using those patterns and then taking the swivel knife and kind of tracing back over the patterns. And then from there, as I got older, it just kind of progressed into me drawing, my own patterns and things like that. I still use some Tandy tools and modify some of them actually to fit a certain look. And there's a lot of Tandy elements that I use into some of the work that I produce even to this day. And I get people all the time ask me, how can they get into leathercraft? Tandy is absolutely the first place I send them, because it's a one-stop shop of, you know, everything you need to know. You can walk in there not knowing anything about leather, and you can get pretty much everything you need in one location, and that's pretty unique. So Tandy has been absolutely a huge part into, I would say, just about any leather worker's career has all started at Tandy. So there's a lot of challenges in this business, really. It's hard to name just one. You know, early on it was, how do you price your work? That's probably the biggest question that most people have. Even guys who've been doing it 20 or 30 years have a hard time pricing their work. And I remember early on, my grandfather, when I started making stuff to sell, he would look at me and go, "Are you really going to charge that? You need to be charging this much more, and here's why." So, you know, I had kind of him always in the back of my mind telling me, you know, "You're worth more than this. Trust me." But I think a lot of people initially, when they get into the craft, are intimidated because they don't think that their work is good enough, and that's not necessarily the case. So I would say that was, and still is, one of my bigger challenges. You know, finding the right customer for what you're trying to create has been somewhat of a challenge too. You need to know who your customer is and go after that customer, depending on your style of work. I've recently made a switch from a more sophisticated look. Most of my work now is all hand sewn, hand cut. I don't hardly use any machines at all for my work. I'm looking for the right customer for my products right now, and I just recently made this change, and I'm still in this transition period where finding the right customer takes years to find. With the internet and things like that, it makes it a little easier to be found. The customers that I'm striving for don't know me yet. Most people do make products that kind of fit a wide gamut of people, and I was doing that, and I did it on purpose to initially get started and get my feet up under me and get the ball rolling. So I wanted to elevate my level of craftsmanship to differentiate myself from a lot of people, and so that's kind of what I'm after right now. The higher end work, trying to marry exceptional construction with a Western look, I guess you could say. How you combat price points from a $300 item from a $30 item is education. That's pretty much the only way you can do it, is to educate the customer on why is this that much more. And some customers don't care, you know, which is okay. You know, they're not your customer. Your customer is the person who appreciates the time and effort it takes to make this item, and that's why finding your customer is so important. Yes, I do run into that a lot, because I have old customers who are, you know, ranching cowboys who don't care about having a $300 item. They want an $80 item that's going to last them just as long. But there is a level of craftsmanship that I'm trying to reach that very few people in the world ever reach. And there's a group that I highly admire, and it's the only group that I can think of that has the same level of thought into their work as I do, and that's the TCAA. And the TCAA, some of you may not know, is the traditional Cowboy Arts Association, and they formed a group about, I'd say, 20 some odd years ago for this very reason. They wanted to show the world that there is high-end work being done, and you can own a piece of it. And so it's a group of about, I'd say, 12 living members right now, and you know, there's leather workers, there's silversmiths, there's spur makers, and there's rawhide braiders. And every piece that they create for this TCA show in Oklahoma every year is just treat it as a piece of art, and you can find their work online at tcowboyarts.org. I'm not a member of the TCAA. I'm just I'm a fan and a big promoter of theirs because of the work and kind of what they stand for. So yeah, go check those guys out. What I was starting to run into was I was having to make hundreds of something. Let's just say a wallet, for instance. I would have to make probably about 20 or 30 of those in a week. And then also I had all sorts of products, camera straps, belts, portfolios, you name it. And again, these aren't hand tooled, so I can just turn them out. It just got to the point where I had to make a decision once again. Do I stick with what's going on right now and keep doing this monotonous work that a lot of people are starting to do in the maker community, or do I go in a harder route, a slower paced route, because the projects that I do now take a heck of a long time to just do one, and go into the unknown. Here again, I chose the unknown because I'm an artist at heart, and if I'm not coming in to do something that is satisfying me, then why am I doing it? And I know a lot of people can't just do that. I understand. But you got to realize that time is invaluable, and you don't have a lot of it on this earth. And if you can somehow figure out a way to do what you like, then I say go for it. You will struggle, you will have sacrifices you have to make, and you will question yourself quite often. Is this the right thing to do? But just try to keep striving for it. That's all I can say. My name is Clint Wilkinson, and I own Wilkinson Leather Goods here in downtown Denton, Texas. You can find me on Instagram, WilkinsonTX. On Facebook, just search Clint Wilkinson Atelier, and clintwilkinson.com is my website.